Alright, we have a green light at 28 seconds, and now we got red lights. Monitors popping on. There we go, everything looks good. Good afternoon, I'm Agamemnon the First, and welcome to Chronicles of Earth 9. This is our afternoon stream, which we called Fan Fiction, or the Writer's Workshop. We'll be working on some new stories today. Well, new parts of stories we're working on. Couldn't decide what book to work on. We're working on Cathexis, Chapter 3, and Story of Diana. We're in Chapter 10 at the end of it, and on our way to Chapter 11. I kind of would like to work on Cathexis Chapter 3, however, I feel that Chapter 10 and 11 of Story Diana are more in a place that you could actually write them in terms of writing it out on paper, or in this case, a notebook. Cathexis is where we're at in Chapter 3 is very important in that it has to... Chapter 2 pretty much split our people up. Hippolyta was the first to split off from the pack. And then Edda is the second one. And technically Themis was the first one to split off because she's dealing with her issue. New development in that thread is we're going to bring in Dike, or some people call her Dike. She's the daughter of Themis. She's the fourth goddess that's tied to the lasso. There's four goddesses that are tied to the lasso, and Diana's lasso. And Themis is one, her daughter Dike is the other, Hestia and Nemesis are the other two. Where we deviated from mythology is we made Nemesis and Themis sisters. And that's not true. Nemesis is actually the daughter of Nyx, right? Nyx. And Nyx was the daughter of Chaos, also known as Mother Night in some places, but Chaos, Goddess Chaos, is the eldest of the goddesses of the Titans. She's the one that brought all the main 6 primordial gods. Most of them were females, a couple of them were males, and Nyx was one of them. And Nyx is a daughter in real mythology is Nemesis. However, in our mythology, Themis is actually the daughter of, I believe she's a daughter of Cronus and Rhea, I believe. Look that up. Go through our notes. I have a huge library here on my desktop here in Google Chrome. It's on my Wonder Woman research. See, it's a huge library. Themis is one of the top ones. So Themis, but before we get going, it's 10 minutes after 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. It's the 28th of June. It's Friday afternoon stream, and again, this is Fan Fiction. Agamemnon the First. There she is, Themis. In the Roman mythology, she was known as Titanus of divine... Titaness of divine law, or that she was a Titaness. Her siblings, Titan, Tonchirius, Cyclops, and so forth. Her offsprings were the Horae and the Moirae. The Moirae are the goddess of fate. They're important, and let's kind of go through here and go through and explore. That would be kind of a good research. Those a lot of the things we do in the writing workshop is research. And I feel as a writer, the more research you can do, even with a fictional story, the more research you can do and the more realism you can add to the story and depth of the story, it makes it very easy to write the story, I think, because you have all this things to draw on. I call them anchors to tie to. That I feel it makes story kind of writes itself when you think about it. At least for me it does. Themis. In the Greek, this is the Greek letter. It's I read Greek, which is Themios. Themios is an ancient Greek Titaness. She is described as the Lady of Good Counsel and is the personification of divine order, fairness, law, natural law, and custom. Her symbols are the scales of justice, tools used to remain balanced and pragmatic. Themis means divine law rather than human ordinance. Literally, that which is put in place. That's what her name means. That which is put in place. From the Greek verb, it's tetimi. Themi is how it's pronounced. An English person would say tethemi, but in Greek it would be te-themi, meaning to put. Because you have the t and thi and me. There's 3 syllables there. Meaning to put, or I put. To the ancient, I put would be themo. To the ancient Greeks, she was originally the organizer of the communal affairs of humans, particularly assemblies. Moses Finley remarked of Themis as the word used by Homer in the 8th century BCE, or 800 BCE, to evoke the social order of the 10th and 9th century Greek Dark Ages. Now, where you see the 8th century there, that's key, because our heroine, when she enters man's world as a 25-year-old adult woman, she comes into man's world in 850 BCE, which is in that period of time, which is essentially the 9th century. It's just prior to, well, the time of the Trojan War, after all the wars and stuff, led to economic collapse for that region of the world. And it fell into a dark age, and most of that knowledge was lost. And so we're playing on a lot of that in our fiction. And so when we're our heroine comes into the man's world. That's some of the earliest writings of the Homer. Homer was in contemporary time. It is believed Homer isn't one guy. It's a collection of poets, and they write in a certain style. It's what it's believed to be. Anyway, Themis is untranslatable. The actual name is untranslatable. A gift of the gods and is marked of civilized existence. Sometimes it means right custom, proper procedure, social order, and sometimes merely the will of the gods as revealed by an omen. For example, with little of the idea of right. Finley adds, there was Themis, customs or tradition, folkways or mores. Mores meaning morals and not mores. That's where the word mores actually comes from. Whatever we may call it, the enormous power of it is or is not done. It is done. The world of Odysseus had a highly developed sense of what was fitting and proper. Much of our mythology, as it relates to the Greek, comes from Hesiod in our fiction, and that's generally what we pull towards. He wrote the most extensive part of Greek mythology. In our mythology, since it comes into modern time, is we're taking that mythology and adapting it to our own purpose, and we're evolving it to the modern time. The superhero concept of the hero comes from the Greek, and the superhero is actually a modern adaptation of that concept. In mythology, the personification of abstract concepts is characteristics of the Greeks. The ability of the goddess Themis to foresee the future enabled her to become one of the oracles of Delphi. It's actually pronounced Delphi. It should be Oracles of Adelphi is the name, which in turn led to the establishment of the goddess of divine justice. And that's why in our fiction she's the eldest of the goddess. Some classical representations of Themis show her holding a sword, believed to represent her ability to cut from fiction, fact from fiction. For her, there was no middle ground. Depictions of Lady Justice wearing a blindfold are modern and not classical. The blindfolded Lady Justice is actually her daughter Dike, or Dike, some people pronounce. And in our mythology, they work together as mother and daughter. Themis built the oracle of Adelphi at Adelphi and was herself oracular. According to another legend, Themis received the oracle of Delphi from Gaia and later gave it to Phoebe. Then Themis is disregarded. When Themis is disregarded, Nemesis brings just and wrathful retribution. Thus, Themis shared the Nemesian temple of Rhamnos, which is why we put them both in the lasso of truth. Themis is not wrathful. She of the lovely cheeks was the first to offer her a cup when she returned to Olympus, distraught over threats from Zeus. Themis presided over the proper relation between man and woman. In the basis of rightly ordered family was seen as the pillar of the demi, when judges were often referred to as Themis to poloi. Olo means all in Greek at the end there, I believe, or the servants of Themis. Such was also the basis for order upon Olympus. Even Hera addressed her as Lady Themis. The name of Themis might be substituted for Adrastea in the telling of the birth of Zeus on Crete. That's another one of her name, Adrastea. Themis was present at Delios to witness the birth of Apollo. According to Ovid, it was Themis rather than Zeus who told Deucalion to throw the bones of his mother over his shoulder to create a new race of humankind after the deluge. That's what we're using in our fiction. The story of the 12 stones. Deucalion. Hesiod's description in contrast to Dike. Themis occurred in Hesiod's Theogony as the first recorded appearance of justice as a divine personage, drawing not only on social religious consciousness of his time, also on many of the early cult religions. Hesiod described the forces of the universe as cosmic divinities. Hesiod portrayed temporal justice, Dike, or Dike some people say, as the daughter of Zeus and Themis, which is what we are doing. Dike executed the law of judgments and sentencing, and together with her mother Themis, she carried out the final decisions of the Moirae. For Hesiod, justice is the center of religious and moral life, who independently of Zeus is embodied of divine will. This personification of Dike stands in contrast to justice viewed as custom or law, or as retribution of sentence. The reason why we're using the lasso of truth and why we tied it to Themis is because the Moray are the ones who fabricate the thread of life. And so when the Amazons, because in our story, Athenata, or Diana Prince, is the tree of life, or the Holy Spirit. Why she carries a lasso is because it's tied to people's fate. When she visits you in the night, she is the last thing standing before you in oblivion. And she comes not in judgment of the person, she comes to learn of their story. And through her, the other four goddesses are the ones that actually determine what to do. She doesn't carry out justice on her own. Askelion's description in the play Prometheus Bound, traditionally attributed to Aeschylus. Some people would say Oculus. Themis is the mother of Prometheus, gave him foreknowledge. In our mythology, that's not so. Prometheus is a primordial. He's one of the eldest of Titans, and he's equal to Gaia. Gaia is one of the 6 primordial goddesses in our... actually, I should show you. I have it all written down, right? Try to do it off of memory. I have it all written down. My notebook here. So... So if you see here, I don't know if you can read it, I'll just show you just the sketches of it, but in the versions that I wrote, you have the goddess Chaos, constant creation. She merged with Eum, or in this case the god of all the universes, multi-universes. And through her and him, these 6 primordial gods come into being. You have Gaia, Erebos, Nyx, Hemera, Aether, and Uranus come into being. The union, Gaia is female, Erebos is male, Nyx is female, Hemera is female, Aether is male, and Uranus is male. From these 2 beings, or 6 beings, you have Nyx and Hemera are female, Erebos and Aether, and Gaia and Uranus. The union of Gaia and Uranus is what brings this universe into order. Now, in terms of the multiverse, where there's in the New 52, they said there were 52, which I'm not going with that. Where there are many universes, more than 52, and so they exist in many universes that occurred throughout the multiverse. What we're saying, our cosmology. And then in the beginning, goddess Chaos created 6 titans: Gaia, Nyx, Hemera, Uranus, Uranus, Erebos, Aether. Uranus is also known as Uranus. In a lot of Middle East Mesopotamian religions, he's known as or Anna. And this is where the name Uranus is the combination of 2 names, usually believed. Okay, in the cycles of birth, the union of Nyx and Erebos creates Eros. And in our cosmology, we're saying their union brought Aphrodite. and Eros into existence, and we're saying that Eros and Aphrodite are twin brothers and sisters. In some mythology, they're mother and son, but we're saying that they're equal, that they're brothers and sisters. And in our mythology, Aphrodite is a black woman. We casted Jane Kennedy in that role. I think she would be perfect for that. And then who we casted for Eros is what's his name? Joshua Mora. He plays on Young and Restless, plays Nick on Young and Restless. I thought he'd be pretty cool for the role. Nick Newman, the prodigal son. And then from there, we get Gaia and Uranus union. They're the different ages, age 1, age 2, age 3. And then age is 30,000 years. Saying. Actually, we're saying Nyx and Erebos come into union. And then you have what's called the masculine force and the feminine force. And then the life force is always tied to the female side of the tree. That's why female DNA is pure. Always goes through the female side, the mother side of the tree, and not the father side. Okay. The original gods, Gaia and Uranus, are 15 billion years. That was age 1. Age 2, they gave birth to Rhea and Cronus, and they're 14 billion years old. Age 3, where the Olympic gods were born, the children of Cronus and Rhea, are Hera and Zeus. We're saying the sun is 4.6 billion years old. Rhea and Cronus are 14 billion years old. We're saying that our universe is 15 billion years old, which is the age of Uranus. The actual Titans, in our lore, the primordial Titans are ageless, so they live outside of time, so they're not affected by time. But we have to give them a year age, so with 15 billion years. The Olympic gods are all 4.5 billion years old. Hera and Zeus. Sol, the sun, is only 4.5 billion years old. So now when we get down into Athena and Ares, they're slightly younger than the Olympic gods. Okay, and then as we get down into the anatomically modern human, they're 10,800 years old. Okay, Zeus destroys the first humans, or what is called Third Earth, in 10,800 BCE. This wiped out all of life on Earth and removed the effects of magic from the world of Earth 9. In the universe, there are 3 primary forces acting on everything. God is chaos, the primordial gods, and the Olympic gods. Supplement note, this all leading to the master plan for the antagonists in the story. My desire is to have each character with their own plans. The states will have their own plans, and this is much how life works. A collage of overlapping plans. One of the things that we have to further research before we can really start writing affects us more is we have to better define how the orb of Prometheus fits in the story. It's not very well defined in Many Facets of Greed and Road to Redemption, just how the orb of Prometheus fits in. I believe somewhere between book 3 and book 4 we can show that opportunity. Now, one thing I have suggested or thought of is with the lasso, and this is why we're going over Themis right now, is that in the old Wonder Woman lore, the more common lore, people tend to get hold of the lasso, and that's how they trap her. They get the magic and they trap her. Now, one of the reasons why we have the lasso being tied to actual people in the story, or goddesses, is that I kind of wanted to make it like Thor's hammer, where just not anybody could pick it up. You had to be of a certain quality of person, and only the goddess of justice could pick up the lasso of truth. And anyone else who tried to pick it up, I just couldn't do it. It was impossible in our story, and I thought that would be a really good thing. So however, I kind of want to write it in a story where I like the idea in William Marston's story where Wonder Woman always got herself captured on purpose. In some respects, I think James Bond does that. He gets himself captured on purpose, and part of his plan is to escape. And so if you have a character that can't be killed and is pretty much a spirit of life in the story, you can have all kinds of fun things happen with the character, where she can go through a lot of really terrible things happen to the character, because it's not really going to hurt the character. So you could have her, like, she could change her form and be like, when she comes to her charges, she can be the person that person desires. So when you're describing her, you don't have to necessarily come up with a completely different description. You could just simply write it as in the moment she became what that person fantasized or that person dreamed of. What that person desired is the woman she became. So when you're dealing with a charge, she's like a serial killer. That makes it relatively simple device in the story, that she would come to the person and he would smack her upside the head and drag her to his lair, basically, and pretty much kill her. But she would live through it, and she would come back out of the grave and pretty much haunt the guy, and that's how they would capture him, because Themis and Nemesis are the ones that are carrying out the divine law. So, and is this person redeemable, is what they're saying. And I always thought it would be cool if that's really what Wonder Woman did in the story. Was she wasn't a police officer in the story. And I always thought it would be cool, because one of the things that at least superhero fiction does is they try not to murder people indiscriminately. They try to, even fiction for that matter, and literature as a whole, they try not to just blatantly kill people in the story. Even in Dracula, the way the deaths were handled in the story, they were done kind of in a dignified way. I always felt they didn't just indiscriminately kill people in the story. Everybody that died in the story, in some way, the story went to great lengths to show that person was a living person with family. People cared about that person. Even Dracula, to some extent, when they killed him off, they did it in a humane way. So Frankenstein too, even some level, except for Frankenstein, the monster that is, he's the only one that pretty much killed indiscriminately in the story. But he did it because the guy refused to make him a bride. So he carried out his threat in the story. So and then the one woman took the fall for it, even though she's not the one that murdered anybody. She's the one who took the fall for it, which was kind of a weird part of the story. But anyway, let's get back to here. So, look at the family. In Greek mythology, Hesiod mentions Themis among 6 sons, 6 daughters, Gaia and Uranus, Earth and Sky. Among these titans of primordial myth, few were venerated as specific sanctuaries in classical times. The only consort for Themis mentioned in the sources below is Zeus. One of her few children was called Natura, or the Greek goddess of the forest. The Horae, the hours, or Horai, is what it was. AE in Greek is a diphthong. It's also a diphthong in Latin. And whenever you have AE as a diphthong, it's phonetically an I. So it'd be Horai, where the word hours comes from. With Zeus, she more certainly bore the Horae. These embodiments of the right moment, the righteous of order unfolding in time, in Astrea, first generation Axo, Carpo, and Thallo, the grower, the food bringer, and the plant raiser. Second generation is Diki, Justice, Irene, some people would say Irene, peace, and Greek would be Eunomonia. You would pronounce all the syllables of pneumonia, Eunomia, order of law. English person would say eunomonia, eunomia. Probably what an English person would say. But in Greek, both the E and the U, the F, would be pronounced. Let's see what the Greek phonetic is here. It's not saying it. This would be Irene and Eunomia. And then the Morai, or Morae, the Fates. Followers of Zeus claim that it was with him that Themis produced the Morae, or the 3 Fates, the fragment of the Pindar. However, tells that the Morae were already present at the nuptials of Zeus and Themis. Nuptial would be the marriage. Then, in fact, in their time, the sexual act was the nuptial. People nowadays think of marriage as the actual ceremony that the people are in, where the man and wife are joined in love understanding. Well, that is not what marriage was at their time. They had sex, and that was the nuptial in their time period. Zeus and Themis, and in fact, the Morae rose with Themis. If you see a lot of in the movie, what is it? Not the Holy Grail. What was it? It was about the Holy Grail, but anyway, with Tom Hanks, and then they were showing that pagan ritual where the girl walked in and she was horrified by what we see. But if you view that through an actual pagan, they view sex as this very open thing. So you have a bunch of people standing around watching people having sex. It's not, oh my god. They're like, oh, whatever. She freaked out because she had never seen anything like that. So, but what they were doing was actually not violent at all. It was just people having sex. But leave it to the Christians to ruin it. Anyway, in fact, the Morae rose with Themis from the springs of Okeanos. Greek would be Okeanos, the encircling world ocean, and accompanied her up the bright sun path to meet Zeus at Mount Olympus. To complement Pindar, Hesiod also tells us in the Theogony that the Morae were born from Nyx, who lay with no one. Clotho was the weaver, Lachesis the lot caster, and Anthropos was the inevitable, the cutter. That's what that means. Anthropos means to cut, or make smaller, right? Deimos had several temples in Greece, though they are not described in any great detail by the ancient authors. She had temples of the oracular shrine of Zeus at Dodona, at Tanagra in Athens, and a temple of Themis at Iconia in Phthiotis. Thessalia Pausanias described her sanctuary in Thebes in somewhat more detail than what was normally the case and may therefore have been of more importance. Along the road from the Neston Gate at Thebes, Boeotia are 3 sanctuaries. There is a sanctuary of Themis with an image of white marble. Adjoining it is the sanctuary of the Moirae, the Fates, her daughters, while the third is of Zeus Agorios of the market. Agora means center, and in Greek towns the agora was always the center of town, and that's where the marketplace was. In some respect, I think the word island comes from that. I remember when I was studying Latin, one of the stories, they were talking where they murdered Caesar. It's actually pronounced Kaiser in Latin, but modern people say Caesar. Although in Latin it would be Kaiser. But and he was murdered in the island part of the town, which is normally the center part of the town, right? Anyway, Themis also had her altar at Olympia. On what is called Stomion, or mouth, the altar to Themis has been built. Themis was sometimes depicted in the sanctuaries of other gods and may have shared temples with them occasionally. She is mentioned to have shared a temple of Aphrodite in Epidaurios within the grove of the sanctuary Clespios, saying that Clepios is an alternate pronunciation. At Epidaurios, or a temple of Artemis, an image of Epione, and a sanctuary of Aphrodite and Themis, a race course. Here's the sort of family tree. So, in our fiction, Uranus and Gaia are the primordial goddess. They give birth to Oceanus, Tethys, Hyperion, Thea, Creus, and Eurybia. Atreus, Pallas, and Perseus. Pallas is another name for Artemis. Selene, Eos, and Helios, the rivers and the oceanids. And along with them, Cronus and Rhea are born, and Chaos and Phoebe. Through Cronus and Rhea, you have Hestia, Hera, Poseidon, Zeus. Demeter and Hades are born. They had 6 children. Zeus and Leto gave birth to 2 twins, Apollo and Artemis. Asteria gave birth to Hecate. And in our mythology, Hecate is the mother of the we're calling the Gorgon. Even though Medusa was cursed by Athena, then someone's talking and it's kind of annoying. Athena sort of the way the Gorgon come about is there are three beings, and the last of them was a human who was cursed by Athena, and that's how the Gorgon come into existence. What we're saying in our mythology is the Gorgon, or sort of the balance in nature of what in our nature we have. The angels are the neutral characters, right? So to balance that out, you have the Gorgon, which all the demons are tied to. And then so the leader of that is the Gorgon Queen, who Selene Kyle will become in our lore. That's her destiny. Right now there isn't a Gorgon Queen in power. And the last Gorgon Queen was Medusa, who was killed by Perseus in Greek mythology. And Gargon, not Gargon, but in our mythology, Trigon cannot come back in the world until there is a queen, Gargon Queen, in place. That must happen before he can return, which is one of the reasons why she has to return. So anyway, Themis there is the child of Gaia and Uranus. And through Zeus she bore the Horae, and through Zeus she bore the Muses. And Mnemosyne, so forth. So that's sort of the tree. A lot of these are confused because depending on the writer, some of these are backwards. So anyway, that's sort of Themis's thing there. So up here, let's look at Themis and Nemesis. You look at, she is Nemesis. There she is in Nemesis. She's the one who seeks retribution. Ancient Greek religion, Nemesis. And it's spelled in Greek Nemesis. Nemesis. Nemesis is what it says there. Also called Rhamnosia or Rhamnusia, the goddess of Rhamnos. It's a goddess who enacts retribution against those who succumb to hubris, arrogance before the gods. Another name is Adrastea, meaning the inescapable. She's the one that actually kills people in the story. Through Diana, or Athenata. When her sword turns red. The way we have it in the story, we kind of modify it like a lightsaber, which we call the sacred athame, and it changes. Whereas a lightsaber is like a static color, in our fiction, it changes color. And when it's a red blade, she pierces that into you. You're basically blinked out of existence. And then when it's a blue blade, she's in tank form, and it will injure you and knock you out and stun you, but it won't kill you. And when the blade is green, she's in healer mode, and it actually heals you. The blade can heal you. So, that's how the blade works in her story. So here we go. Etymology, the origin of her name. We won't worry about that. The origin. Divine retribution is a major theme in the Hellenic world view, providing the unified theme of tragedies of Sophocles and many other literary works. Hesiod states, Also deadly Nyx bore Nemesis, an affliction to mortals subject to death, in the book Theogony, 223, page 223, though perhaps an interpolated line. Nemesis, or Nemesis, appears in a still more concrete form in a fragment of the epic Kypria. English person would probably say Cypria. Must be Capria. She is implacable justice, that of Zeus in the Olympian scheme of things, although it is clear she existed prior to him, as her images looked similar to several other goddesses such as Cybele, Rhea, Demeter, and Artemis. As the goddess of Rhamnos, Nemesis was honored and placated in an archaic sanctuary in the isolated district of Rhamnos, in northeastern Attica. There she was the daughter of Oceanus, a primeval river ocean that encircles the world. Pausanias noted her iconic statue there. It included a crown of stags and little Nikes, and was made by, how do you say it? Phidias after the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. Crafted from a block of Pyrrhian marble brought by the overconfident Persians, who had intended to make a memorial stela after their expected victory. Her cult may have originated at Smyrna. She is portrayed as a winged goddess wielding a whip or dagger. Hold on, I'll be right back. All right, here we go. Where was I? She is portrayed as a winged goddess wielding a whip or a dagger. We're gonna clue in on the whip and dagger part. The poet Medes would be the Greek. Meso means right middle. Medes would be the name. Wrote the hymn to Nemesis in the early 2nd century AD, where he addressed her. Nemesis, winged balancer of life, dark-faced goddess, daughter of justice. Her adamantine bridles. Adamantine is, if you read a lot of Marvel superheroes, that's where they got the metal adamantium from. It's supposed to be what shield Aegis, the shield of Zeus, was made from, was adamantium. But it comes from the Greek riddles that restrain the frivolous insolences of mortals. In early times, the representations of Nemesis resembled Aphrodite, who sometimes bears the epithet Nemesis. Later, as the maiden goddess of proportion and the avenger of crime, she has as attributes a measuring rod, tally stick, a bridle, scales, and sword, and scourge, and she rides a chariot drawn by griffins. Griffins are like big lion dudes, right? Fortune and retribution. The word nemesis originally meant the distributor of fortune, neither good nor bad, simply due proportion to each according to what was deserved. Later, nemesis came to suggest the resentment caused by any disturbance of this right proportion, a sense of justice that could not allow it to pass unpunished. The others reconnect the name with to feel just resentment from the 4th century onward. But how we're using her in our mythology is she's one of the goddesses who works with Themis, and in our mythology they're sisters, twin sisters, and they have very similar functions, only Themis is more of a balanced nature. She tries to that's what justice really is. It's more of a, she has a real sense of a balanced way of doing things. And Nemesis, on the other hand, she's balanced too, but she believes in retribution. She's the living embodiment of retribution. So in the story, she takes over, and when the scales balance in her direction, she takes over. So in the story of Cathexis, one of the things we're struggling with in the story is if we allow Dr. Psycho to take control of Athenata, and he does cruel things to her, does that mean we therefore allow Nemesis to act upon him? What I'm thinking of doing in the story is, since Athenata is just, she's actually captured in the story, but I think because of who she is as an angel in the story, I don't think that he should gain control of the other goddesses. He should only control her. However, I kind of like the idea of symbiotic relationship. And I'm thinking that we should let him carry out his free will because he's a human. And by divine law, with the pact they signed with Prometheus, we can therefore let Dr. Psycho do as he wills, to however much he wants. Because in the end, he's just signing his own grave. And the more dark he goes in the story, it's only gonna be terrible for him in the end. So he's sort of sowing his own demise in the story. And I think part of what Athenata does in the story with her chargers normally is she just lets the people carry out what they want, because she can't really be hurt by the person, and it's not really her who's acting out, it's the goddesses that are acting out. And so I feel that we should let them do that. But as a twist to it, since also in the story, when Hippolyta, because she's the leader of the Amazons, her girdle is tied to all the other Amazons' girdle. So if the queen is captured, because the succubi or incubus capture Hippolyta, therefore then enslave the rest of the Amazons. See in the story. And because Dr. Psycho raped, sodomizes Athenata, he's connected to her and she's connected to him symbiotically. Therefore, in Apollo's taken prisoner, he's taken prisoner too. So the twist of the story is that he enslaves Athenata, but because he enslaved her, he's now in control of the girdle, right? So he in turn becomes enslaved. So he's going to be motivated to become not enslaved to this succubi and incubus, right? So I think that would be a better story device for that particular subplot. And I think it would be cool that in the end, he realizes that for him to gain his freedom, he has to let Athenata go. But a flip side to that, another plot that we can do is when the Amazons are captured in the story by their foes, I kind of want to make it in the law that the person has 30 days, or by the next full moon is how it's going to be written. Servitude must be rendered, or suffrage. They must end the suffrage of the angel, or the person who is bringing the suffrage onto the feminine spirit will be killed. What will happen is they'll go into their berserker mode, banshee mode, basically, and the banshee will then kill the human host who has enslaved them. Basically, the act of free will, because by divine law, because the Amazons can't assert free will. Therefore, whoever enslaves them can't assert free will too. And because they're asserting the free will of the Amazon, by law, the Banshee will kill them in the story. And I think that would be a better way of doing it. One of the possible ways we can go with the story. And that way, I think it would lead to a better book in both book 3 and book 4. That what ends up happening is ultimately the Amazons become free. However, the book only occurs in a 20-day period of time, so there's not enough time for that, because full moon's 30-day period of time, so there wouldn't be enough time in the book to do that. So however, they can talk about it in the story, and then in a future book that could be I kind of like the idea when I'm writing to introduce things in one book and then later on carry it out. See where that goes. And I kind of like that. So that's Nemesis story. Let's look at SDI is the next one, right? Doni is the daughter of Aphrodite, and it's where the Eros, and it's where the word hedonist comes from. Hestia right there. We've changed Trigon in our fiction, made him more of a believable character in the story, and fit him in our cosmology. In ancient Greek religion, Hestia, or Hestia, and right there it's pronounced Isthia. See right here? Greek, that would be Isthia, or hearth, sorry, virgin goddess of the hearth. Right ordering of domesticity, the family, the home, and the state. In Greek mythology, she is the daughter and firstborn child of Cronus and Rhea. Hestia received the offering of every sacrifice in the household, or at every sacrifice in the household. In the public domain, the hearth, or Prytaneum, functioned as her official sanctuary. The establishment of a new colony, flames of Hestia's public hearth, in the mother city would be carried to the new settlement. Her Roman equivalent is Vesta, or Vista. Herodotus equates the Scythian Tebeti with her. The Zoroastrian holy fire Atar of the Sansanians in Adhor, you say that, Gushnas, is also equated with Hestia by Procopius. Hestia's name means hearth, fireplace, or altar, stemming from the same root as the English verbal form was, or wis. To live, dwell, pass the night. It thus refers to the okos, the domestic home, household, house, or family. I thought okos also means all in Greek. An early form of the temple is the hearth house. The early temples of Dreros and Phrynius on Crete are this type indeed. Temple of Apollo at Delphi, which always had its inner Hestia. The Mycenaean, English version say Mycenaean, the Mycenaean Great Hall in Magoron, like Homer's Hall of Odysseus and Ithaca, had a central hearth. Likewise, the hearth of the later Greek Prytaneum was the community and government's ritual of secular focus. That's a lot. Hestia is the god of the first Olympian generation. She was the eldest daughter of Titans Rhea and Cronus, and sister to Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, and Hades. Immediately after their birth, Cronus swallowed all his children. Hestia was the first who was swallowed, except the last and youngest Zeus, who forced Cronus to degorge his siblings and led them in a war against their father and other Titans. As first to be devoured and last to be yielded up again, Hestia was thus both the eldest and youngest daughter. This mythic inversion is found in the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, 700 BC. Hestia rejects the marriage suits of Poseidon and Apollo, and swears herself to perpetual virginity. She thus rejects Aphrodite's values and becomes, to some extent, her chaste, domestic complementary, or antithesis. Aphrodite could not bend or ensnare her heart. Zeus assigns Hestia a duty to feed and maintain the fires of Olympian hearth with the fatty, combustible portions of animal sacrifices to the gods. Wherever food was cooked, where an offering was burnt, she thus had her share of honor. Also, in all the temples of the gods, she has a share of honor. Among all mortals, she was chief of the goddesses. Hestia's Olympian status is equivocal. At Athens, in Plato's time, notes Kenneth Dorter, There was a discrepancy in the list of the 12 chief gods as to whether Hestia or Dionysus was included with the other children. The altar to them at the Agora, for example, included Hestia, but the East frieze of the Parthenon had Dionysus instead. Hestia's omission from some list of the 12 Olympians is sometimes taken as illustrations of her passive, non-confrontational nature. By giving her Olympian seat to the more forceful Dionysus, prevents heavenly conflict, but no ancient source or myth describes such a surrender or removal. Since the hearth is immovable, Hestia is unable to take part even in the procession of the gods. Alone the other antics of the Olympians, Burkitt remarks. Her mythographic status as firstborn of Rhea and Cronus seems to justify the tradition which a small offering is made to Hestia before any sacrifice. Hestia comes first. Not so for every Greek in every generation, however. Let's go on. There's her genealogy. In the myth, Cronus fights with his father Uranus. He castrates him, and his genitals fall in the ocean, which is Gaia, and the union of Gaia and Uranus genitals create Aphrodite. In our mythology, we're just saying Aphrodite was one of the original primordial goddesses. And not that it's not a good story, but I'm going to deviate from that just a little. Let's go read Diki. I thought I had saved her little thing where. Let's just look it up. Now her name is Diki. Some people say Dyke. That's not her name. The mispronunciation of her name. She is the daughter of Themis. She's the blind justice, actually. In our story, we make her blind. She can't see. In ancient Greek culture, Diki, see that pronunciation there, it's pronounced Diki, 2 syllables, is the goddess of justice and spirit of moral order and fair judgment based on memorial custom in the sense of socially enforced norms and conventional rules. According to Hesiod in the Theogony, page 901, section 1, she was fathered by Zeus upon his second consort, Themis. She and her mother are both personifications of justice. She is depicted as a young, slender woman carrying a physical balance scale and wearing a laurel wreath. She is representative of the constellation Libra. which is named for the Latin name of her symbol, which means scales. Often associated with Astrea, the goddess of innocence and purity. Astrea is also one of her epitaphs referring to her appearance in the nearby constellation Virgo, which is said to represent Astrea. This reflects her symbolic association with Astrea, who too has a similar iconography. And the sculptures of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia have as their unifying iconographical conception of Dike of Zeus. In the poetry, she is often the attendant, Peridros of Zeus. In the philosophical climate of the late 5th century Athens, Dike could be anthropomorphized as a goddess of moral justice. She was one of 3 second-generation Horai, along with Eunomia, order, and Irene in peace. Eunomia, and that unsullied fountain Dike, her sister, sure support of cities, and Irene, the same kin, who are stewards of wealth for mankind, 3 glorious daughters of wise consul Themis. She ruled over human justice, while her mother, Themis, ruled over divine justice. Her opposite was Adikia, or injustice, in reliefs of the archaic chest of Cephalus, preserved at Olympia. A commonly Dike swallowed the ugly Dikia and beat her with a stick. Later art of rhetoric treated the personification of abstract concepts as artistic device, which developed the into the allegorizing the late antiquity bequeath of patristic literature. In a future Euhemerist interpretation, Dike was born a mortal, and Zeus placed her on earth to keep mankind just. The clue in this was impossible and placed her next to him on Mount Olympus. Why we're making her part of the lasso of truth is mainly because she's the daughter of Themis, but she represents the man's law, human law, and her mother represents divine law, divine justice. Therefore, her aunt, her mother's sister, Nemesis, would be divine justice. And Hestia would represent the truth. Unsullied and tamed truth. The fire that burns within Athenata. And then so what that means, if you think of our cosmology, Diana is really the conduit between heaven and earth, man's world and divine. Through her you have the scales of the mother and daughter, scale of divine law versus man's law, and then retribution versus justice, truth versus reality. One of the reasons why we gave Athenata the truth vision is because sort of needed it. And we moved it away from the lasso, although the lasso still holds that as a device. It's not, I thought it would be more fitting if it wasn't the actual power of the heroine. And not just something someone else could just take. I feel in some ways that when they make Athenada's power some artifact, I feel that it's not true to the character, because if you look at a lot of the male characters, especially like Superman in the story, his powers are sort of inert, where her powers originally were inert, but later on they made them sort of artificial. Boy, anybody could put them on, right? Anybody could take it away, and I wanted to make it so that her powers couldn't just be taken away. Her powers are hers. They were given her by the gods, and they cannot be taken away by humans. Wretched humans. So there we go. It's 3:20 right now. Been kind of babbling on, but there's a method to our madness. What we started to do when we started this whole journey today, let me make this smaller, was decide where to take the story in the two different books, and I wanted to tie up some points, brainstorming for ideas. But I felt that we needed a better understanding of what these four goddesses represent with Athenada, because it will help us to better define how they're going to be used in book 3 and 4, and to some extension in book 20, because through book 18, 19, and 20, Athenada is separated from them physically. And she sort of has to go on her own, and this is the first time in this series we're getting to see Athenada, the character. And we get to see her through one book where she's in Apocalypse, and then we get to see her in the next book, which is Story of Diana. And so I think Apocalypse, the story of Apocalypse, is going to be a really good story in the sense that we finally get to see the character, who she is, what she's about. She's not going to be stripped away of her powers. One common thing that a lot of people do in superhero stories is they sort of have the episode where they strip the character away of her superpowers and let her be mortal. I don't like that aspect of a story. I think you can still make the story compelling, but why not just give her the powers that she has? And then when she's there, she doesn't have all her artifacts. She's who she is, and she has all her innate ability, but she's hurt, and she's sort of disoriented in the environment that she's in, because she's in another universe, but the environment has a natural ability to drain her energy, or cause her to have to keep her energy up, and ultimately she's defeated early on by all these elements going on. But her defeat is what allows her to eventually triumph and overcome the enemy, because the enemy has all this power that he's got, all this technology. And from a story point of view, it allows us as a writer to see the difference between powers that arrive through technology, or what is artificial, versus what is natural. And as a device of literature and sort of a scientific thing, I kind of like that, because in science you have this sort of battle going on between what are natural things and what are artificially or technologically derived entities. To illustrate that or make an example of it is this evolution. A lot of people have a misconception of what evolution actually is in science. And what evolution actually is it requires what they call a natural selection. And it's derived through natural means, meaning an organism is cut off from environment through a natural barrier of some type. Like when the continents were all one continent, all these organisms were living in these places. So then when the continents drifted apart, there's a natural barrier between one land and another. So you have these organisms which were living one place and another organism living in another. So as one organism develops through this natural barrier, they then, through a process known as descent of modification is what it's called. Over time, the organism develops essentially into a new species. And what happens is how you know it's a different species is that the original species and the new species can't reproduce together. You know what I'm saying? That's like the difference between primates. An ape and a human being can't reproduce together. They're different, although they're similar in species. They're different species altogether because they cannot reproduce together. They're evolutionarily different. And how we can illustrate this in this story with Immortals is that Darkseid developed his powers through artificial means, technologically derived powers. And Athenada's powers are inert. She was born with them. And so inherently, as the writer of the story and writer of the cosmology, we have to pick a side. And we're saying in our lore that the naturally derived organism, the Titan in this case, who has her powers naturally derived, is the stronger of the two. I'm saying the technological derived person will never be at that level, can never be at that level. They can somewhat be equal with them, but they'll never surpass it because technology, like everything else, is tied to the universe and tied to space and time, meaning it's useful, has a usefulness at some point in time, but beyond that point in time it becomes useless. And you see this in a lot of technology. At a time the typewriter was technologically important, but its time has passed. Now we use computers for that, word processors for that, and it's much more efficient that way. Why? Because people don't want to cut down trees. So not that a typewriter isn't useful, it's just its time has passed. Like the shovel. Shovel is a piece of technology that was developed thousands of years ago. It lives on because people still have a need for a shovel. There's only one way to dig a hole, but they have power shovels, power diggers, explosives, all kinds of different ways you can dig a hole. But shovels have pretty much stayed the same. So they derive through technology. But what we're saying in our cosmology is that we finally get to see in this story what the Titans are really about. And at the heart of it, they have a responsibility to maintain the universe. The universe always must be in a state of balance, a state of free. There always has to be a state of raw nature versus ordered nature, chaos and order. And through chaos and order, the universe grows. In World of Warcraft, they sort of the recent stories sort of tied into this kind of idea where you have Horde and Alliance. The Horde and Alliance are important because they balance each other's nature. Without one, the other would die. The other would cease to exist. Just like in our fiction, the mortals and immortals need each other to exist. Basically, the symbiote relationship. Caught in between them are the metahumans, which the metahumans are immortal or mortal in this case, but they have divine powers. And then, but in life there has to be chaos, there has to be order, and it has to be balance for everything to grow, everything that when it becomes imbalanced, one is more than the other, life will find a way to balance it out. You see that in reality. Sort of things swung chaotic for in recent years, but now it's swinging back to order, if you look at it. Why? Because people grow tired of it. People don't want to live in chaos, and that's sort of where our fiction is. One of the things I like to do with our fiction is explore what I call the near past. Things that we're doing with our 1950s story is we're getting to explore segregation, and it's a topic that many people are uncomfortable talking about, but we're going to approach it from the one aspect of anthropology and another aspect of psychology from a historic point of view. And so through our angels, we can explore that story as neutral characters. People have nothing really to gain or lose in this struggle. But through those stories, we can visit how we got to this point historically, going all the way back to the 12th century and time to modern times. How do we get to this point? And I think it's a fascinating story in that the way the world was, the way the world is, the way the world's going to be. I think it's always fascinating story for me to write. I think that's, and through this character we can do that. She's the only character in DC that you could do that with, explore all these things, and I feel that through our fan fiction and the modern stories of superheroes, especially with this character, they're too fixated on the here and now, what's happening today. And I think the stories are let's say not very good. They're about written within what they're trying to do, but I think they're limited. The scope of the stories are very tiny and very sometimes absurd would be the correct description. They're just, the characters are always stuck in this never-ending battle, and they just go from one battle, one form of violence to another. There's no breaking point, there's no stopping point. And you can't do that because at some point the writer's going to become desensitized to that, right? It's like with us, we're writing in a burlesque parody. There's no way that we could sit there and write 144,000 word novel and there's nothing but sex after sex after sex. I would think within 12,000 words people would just get tired of it. right, or just become desensitized. So you have to sort of build to it and plan your moments and give the people what they want, kind of thing. And kind of babbling here, but kind of want to go to this story. In the very beginning, I'll show because it's short. You got plenty of time. Let's make this bigger. It'll be blurry and blurrier because it's a repeat. It's already been processed, but we probably should make it just smaller. As long as people can hear it, that's all that matters. And start it. Right, here we go. I just realized the speakers are on. Let me go ahead and turn those off. Put up the chat bar. Here we go. A little bit better. You can see what's going on. I'm monitoring it over there. I want to be able to see it here. Wanted to start a little later. It's Saturday. Now, when I was recording this, the mics were off. For some reason, OBS Studio restarted it. Reset the filters, and so they weren't working correctly. And so you're hearing that sort of digital sound in the background. That's what's causing that. But okay. So, especially with the writing stuff, I'm not really sure how I want to proceed with it, but there's always a lot more noise at this time of day, and the mics pick it up. So although I like streaming at noon, when we stream at noon, when we're pretty much just the grind, it's a little easier because there's music playing, so it sort of drowns out the background. But the scene in Batman where he's driving over all the buildings and you're like, oh, the police are like chasing him, but that's going on. That's where these guys are at, and they're seeing this guy, the Batmobile going off, and these guys run into Doomsday basically. And in our movie, Doomsday has a little, like a tiny screenplay. Yeah, go back on it. I think we'll do that later. I'm gonna have to fix that. Sounds a little bit better. So listen to Cathexis, chapter 2. It's 3:40, so an hour and 8 minutes. It would finish around 4:40. So let's review Cathexis.
Steve Trevor's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. The details of this journal will recount the events of the past few days as I had remembered them. This journal is one piece of several that will contribute to the larger mosaic of the report. The events in this entire report are true.
Let's go back a little bit. Okay, I've actually read through some of the policies of Twitch the last couple of days, and we're just gonna play the parts out because we're on a adult setting for Twitch, so only adults should be able to access the channel, and it's clearly written that it's for adult only. But we're not showing any nudity or anything like that. But the problem is the descriptions in there are sexually there's sexual acts, sexual intercourse going on. So that could be I feel that that could be a gray area. But there's clear warning, and you can actually have that kind of. Under the Twitch policy, they define it under art, and they're saying that they're trying to work with people in that context. But because it's a story, and in this story, the character's writing about it in the story. See what I'm saying? So it's in one of the character's words. I don't think that what we're doing is a violation of their Twitch policy. Now, I'm biased because I'm the one that wrote the story. So that's kind of a that's why it's a gray area. But I haven't heard anything official. No one's actually told us anything. But I don't think, mainly because we're not using vulgar language. We're not using profanity, definitely. But we're trying to do it in sort of a literature responsible way. But I think we've done everything we can in terms of being responsible. So it's not really up to us beyond that point. We need more guidance from someone of an official capacity, and no one has actually said anything to us about that. So I'm going to assume that what we're doing is okay. And we're going to start with Cathexis, mainly because I want to get in the mood of writing it, and we'll just listen through it. We'll let it play out as its entirety. There is a sexual a sex scene coming up with Hippolyta and Cyrus Gold, but if you remember last week when we were reviewing A Road of Redemption, the last time they were together was 50 years ago. So we felt coming into the story that we needed to get the two characters together, and there would be a long time from chapter 1 to about chapter 4 where there isn't really any sexual stuff going on in the story. And then, so to give the story more action, I thought it would be cool that in the very beginning we got to give Hippolyta and Cyrus a really nice moment together, and that's what we chose to do, because there's a funny sex scene coming up with Etta, and what happens with her is she's having sex with Evan Miles, and in the previous story, Diana gave her the girdle, which augments her strength to 15 times that of a normal human. So Etta gets to thinking, wow, this thing is awesome, because she already has the little telepathy bracelet on. But when she puts the girdle on, she realizes she has all this strength, and she feels things, and these senses are just incredible. So she decides when she's having sex with Evan Miles that she'd wear the belt. So she does that because she wants to see if it would be more. She's kind of interested to see if it would be a more intense sexual experience, which it is. 15 times more. And but unknown to Etta, the girdle is tied to the other Amazons in the story. So mentally, she doesn't realize that the other Amazons are experiencing this. She doesn't know how to control that part of her power yet. So as a noob, she's wearing this belt and she's having this dude. She's having a really good sex time with this guy, and Athenata in the story is with Steve Trevor, and they're talking to General Blankenship, and they're walking through this scene where they're showing all this technology, and then Diana, she's sitting there, and all of a sudden she feels this guy, I'm gonna use the word, poking her. She's like, what the hell? She feels like some dude, like, just because she feels this really intense sexual intercourse going on, because she has empathy and her truth vision. So Diana feels it more intense than all the other Amazons, Hippolyta included. and Diana's weakened at this point. She's hypersensitive right now because her body's healing. So she's like, her body goes into heat immediately. She has like they call it heat flashes. And so she's trying to get out of this meeting. She's trying to outwardly look all cool and professional, but inwardly she's like, I'm dying. And she runs off, and she basically throws herself into this tub of like cold water, basically. And so Etta has this experience, which I think is kind of funny in a story. And I kind of wanted to have that sort of scene in there, because when we start talking about Hippolyta's scene, she goes off to Tartarus to talk with Hades, and she wants to get access to the library there. And to get access to that, she has to be willing to give something up of herself of equal proportion. And so she decides that she's going to be the guest of honor at Hades' party that night. Which is supposed to be this big orgy party with all these demons, and she's going to be the virgin sacrifice for them, which would be pretty cool. You're at this party, and the woman they bring out is the queen of the Amazons, right? So so what demon wouldn't want that? And so she goes through with it. And she kind of knew that she was gonna go through with it. That's why she went alone. And we're going to introduce I Ching in this story, and he's with her, and he goes through this. But this is also tied to her longer story in the next two books. So I thought that this scene coming up and the one with Etta would sort of lighten that blow, make it, we would ease into it. It wouldn't just be all of a sudden we're into this hardcore sex scene. And then the scene with Dr. Psycho and Athenata occurs about midway through the story, and he basically sodomizes her, and that's how he enslaves her in the story. And then he captures Selene Kyle early in the story, and through Dr. Psycho, that's how Athenata comes to meet Selene Kyle in the story. And eventually she's redeemed through her. And this story is a very complex story to write and tell. A lot of moving parts. And part of it is why we're taking our time to write chapter 3 and 4 out completely, because at that point it breaks up into all these parts, and it's we have to really know what occurs later in the story to get that written right. We might have to rewrite it at some point. So it makes more sense. So let's go ahead and play that out. I'm kind of done babbling, so I kind of want to hear the story. So we're going to have an hour or so. We might get through the first chapter here.
Steve Trevor's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. The details of this journal will recount the events of the past few days as I had remembered them. This journal is one piece of several that will contribute to the larger mosaic of the report. The events in this entire report are true. It had been shortly after 12 o'clock in the afternoon when our party loaded into the cars and had driven over to the eastern part of Gotham County, Maryland, to see the brownstone estate of John Soter. Our party consisted of Elizabeth Wayne, Hippolyta Prince, Diana Prince, Etta Candy, Manfred Pennyworth, Patrick Wayne, Silas Wayne, and myself. Hippolyta agreed to purchase the old estate from Elizabeth Wayne. We had decided to take 2 cars to the estate. Elizabeth, Diana, Patrick, and Hippolyta drove in Diana's 1940 blue Pontiac Silver Streak. Diana drove the car. Etta, Manfred, Silas, and myself drove Hippolyta's car, which was a 1940 red Pontiac Silver Streak. Manfred drove the car. The trip to the estate had taken about an hour by car. The estate was located much closer to Washington, D.C. than Wayne Manor, but it was still located in Gotham.
Kind of stop there for a minute. This picks up exactly where book 2 left off. So, those that were... I actually haven't posted those videos yet, so I have to do that today. But, tonight. But, this is exactly where book 2 leads off and where we start up in the story. And, what we want to do with Earth and I, or this book especially, is jump right into the 144,000 word novel. With this book, we could really kind of write the story we wanted to write, complex wise, but it would be twice as long as the previous story. But I like that in that I find that the 12,000 chapter format works great for us, especially in the serial type story. It allows you the freedom to explore each character. It allows you the freedom to explore multiple plots and subplots and plots that go to other books and so forth, or connects things from other books. Is it's that large format of novel is what really makes it all work, I feel, rather than a really short story where you have a small window to tell it and be done with it. But I feel that this length is the best device for us as a product.
County, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Fortunately, our party arrived at the estate after an hour of travel time. The entry gate to the property had been locked by a chain and a padlock. Manfred left the car to unlock the gate. My first glance at the estate revealed to me to be an old estate that had not been occupied in some time. The grass and hedges were overgrown and the building at the gatehouse had not been painted in some time. Manfred had unlocked the gates and set them into the open position so that the cars could pass through. In a short time, he had returned back to the car. Then, we made our way up the road to the mansion. The weather was sunny with a high temperature of 23 degrees Fahrenheit. This had been a mild improvement from this morning's low temperature of 14 degrees Fahrenheit. As our party had trekked up the roadway to the mansion, the structure had come into full view. Despite the fact that the mansion had not been occupied in several years, the brown stonework of the mansion was prominent. The building was a 2-story structure on the front with wide stone masonry blocks of granite. There was a large area in the center of the driveway that I had presumed was a fountain. The entry gate was oriented on the southern boundary of the property, while the roadway from the gate went diagonally along a northwest direction. The front of the mansion faced to the south. A series of tall trees had lined the roadway on both sides of the road from the gatehouse to the mansion. I had estimated that the distance to had been about a half a mile. We had parked our cars close to the front doors of the mansion. Everyone had gotten out of the cars and had used the time to let their legs stretch for a few minutes. "This place is huge," Etta said. "Yes, it has been unoccupied for about 10 years. I'm not sure if the electricity is turned on. Well, to be honest, I'm not even sure if the place had been wired for electricity. In 1932, electricity had been a new technology. However, much of the mansion had used gas heating and steam heating." Elizabeth said. "That is fine, Elizabeth. I will have my own engineers go through and upgrade it to a more efficient power system and reactor." Hippolyta said. "What is a reactor?" Silas asked. "A reactor is a device that produces electrical power by fusing subatomic particles together," Diana said. "We have some portable reactors in the ships. Also, the ship's reactors can provide power to the house if needed," Hippolyta said. "Shall we go inside?" Manfred asked. By all means, Elizabeth said. Our group had waited for Manfred to unlock the front door. Once the door had been opened, then we all went into the building. The doorway led to the foyer, which opened to a grand room. A staircase ran along the left side of the room, and another staircase ran along the right side of the room. The room was unfurnished. In fact, the entire occupancy was unfurnished. What a grand entrance, Elizabeth, Hippolyta said. Elizabeth smiled. Thank you, Hippolyta. This has been my family's ancestral home. Really? Why have you left it unoccupied all these years? Diana asked. Tragically, my father, John Soter, had occupied the home up until his death in 1932. He took his life after my mother, Claire Soter, had died from cancer in 1929. Prior to 1920, my family produced beer in the region, but, as the glooming wave of prohibition swept the country, he decided to convert the plants over to producing Soter Cola. Then the market crashed and he lost a fortune. The Waynes had purchased the property as a favor to John Soter, but the loss of his wife and his financial problems proved too much of a mental strain for him. If you remember, my husband, Kenneth Wayne, had died in 1923, and Alan Wayne, Kenneth's father, died in 1926. With so much tragedy in a short period of time, I never had time to settle the real estate, Elizabeth said. I am sorry to learn about that, Elizabeth, Hippolyta said. Sadly, prohibition ended too late for my father to change his fortune, Elizabeth said. All of us in the room had seemed to feel real empathy for Elizabeth and her loss in her family home. Manfred tried to ease the mood of the room by offering everyone some lemonade that he had packed in a lunch basket for everyone. Etta gave Elizabeth a hug. If this is painful for you, Elizabeth, then we can walk through here at another time, Hippolyta said. No, I'm fine. I hadn't set foot in the house since my father died. My lawyers handled the auctioning of the furniture and personal property. The events of the past few days have taught me the value of moving on and letting go of the past, Elizabeth said. Sometimes, it is the letting go of the object of our cathexis that is most difficult to do, Elizabeth, Hippolyta said. Cathexis? Etta asked. Yes, when people bond with an idea or a person, that bond is called the cathexis, Diana said. For people who bond too deeply with an ideal or a person, they will go to great lengths to justify their behavior of hanging on to that object. These people avoid delaying gratification. This goes hand in hand with personal responsibility. When people seek out psychiatric care, one of the reasons is that they are suffering from either a neurosis or a character disorder. These two conditions are disorders of responsibility, and as of such they are opposite styles of relating to the world and its problems. The neurotic assumes too much responsibility. The person with the character disorder assumes not enough responsibility. When the neurotic is in conflict with the world, they automatically assume that they are at fault. When those with character disorders are in conflict with the world, they automatically assume that the world is at fault, Hippolyta said. That was certainly a mouthful of information, Hippolyta. Silas said. Well, Mother subscribes to the ideal of giving complete answers, young Silas, Diana said while smiling. I apologize, I did not mean to preach, Hippolyta said while chuckling. It's okay, Hippolyta, I like listening to all of the philosophies that Diana and you make reference to from time to time, Silas said. Mother's point about the cathexis is that people, mortals, metahumans, and immortals, form bonds with ideals and people that delegate responsibility of personal behavior away from the self. All partnerships or relationships are about spiritual growth and not self-gratification, Diana said. The mood of the group had changed from one of minor depression to an uplifting manic mood. Everyone had taken a moment to refresh their bodies with the lemonade Manfred had packed for the group. After the refreshments, we all had split up into clusters of 2, and had went about to explore the large manor. The groups were Elizabeth and Hippolyta, Manfred and Etta, Diana and Steve, Patrick and Silas. For the most part, the trip through the manor had been an interest-filled experience. Most of the manor had been empty of furniture. There had been dust everywhere that had built up over the years when the place had been unoccupied. Diana had been able to witness the most grand experience as she could see all the events that had transpired in the house by using her truth vision. While we were exploring the upstairs section of the manor, she called to Themis, the magic lasso. She had appeared before us and had transformed into her mortal humanoid form. Goddess Themis, would you be so kind to help Steve see what I see? Diana said. Of course, Diana, Themis said. Themis waved her arms out to her side and made some incantation that I cannot pronounce. A moment later, a series of threads flowed from out of her hands in all directions to construct a large lens. Inside the lens, I had been able to see the images and hear the sounds of the people who had occupied the rooms. I am not sure how that I understood the information, but it had revealed to me that the manor had been built in the 18th century. The information or data had not come to me in spoken words or any written form. The data seemed to be a stream of consciousness that my mental processes could interpret. To clarify the point, because I understood the world around me through the language of English, then the information had been produced that way for my level of comprehension. The Soder family had lived in the manor for several generations until Elizabeth Soder married Kenneth Wayne. Our party had spent a little over an hour visiting the manor. Then, we made our way back to Wayne Manor.
Diana Prince's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. As our party had loaded back into the cars to head back to Wayne Manor, Manfred had made sure that the house had been secured and had reapplied the lock to the gatehouse. Mother had asked me to accompany her in her car, so Steve, Etta, Hippolyta and I loaded into her car. The others loaded into my car and headed back to the manor. Manfred drove the car with the others and had returned to Wayne Manor. Hippolyta had decided to drive the car so that we could inspect the site in Slaughter Swamp where the remains of Cyrus Gold and Margaret Shaw had been interned all those years ago. The location had been revealed to me when Solomon Grundy and I had our intercourse at the Iceberg Lounge the night before. Mother's growing obsession had been revealed to me via my telepathic power. Deep inside her mind, Hippolyta had felt guilty about the death of her friend Margaret all those years ago. As my truth vision revealed to me the tragedy of her death, Mother's obsession had begun to grow. Had Margaret's soul been lost to us forever? Mother's feelings for Margaret Shaw had only deepened. Mother had wanted to inspect the site of the murder, and she had wanted me to conduct a detailed survey of the crime scene. The drive to the crime scene had taken another hour. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As we approached the site of the murder, the car shifted into four-wheel drive mode. Hippolyta navigated the car to a spot in a small clearing near the road. The terrain in the area had changed over the last 50 years. Many of the trees were much larger than they had been in the 1890s. The narrow dirt road had been changed into a paved top road. We all had stepped out of the car to walk around and to get our sense of directions collected. I had taken the opportunity to call on Goddess Themis. I had raised my hand. Kin had called to her. Goddess Themis had appeared before us in all her glamour. I felt that her being the Oracle of Adelphi would be useful for the purpose of gathering data. Goddess Themis, we will need your assistance locating the crime scene. Of course, Diana, Themis said. Using my truth vision, I had created an illusion in everyone's mind of what the terrain looked like with my telepathy, I could project the illusion in everyone's mind to create the reality. As far as their senses and perceptions, the illusion would be reality. I feel that it may be necessary for the purposes of this report to clarify some details. For the mortals or non-meta-humans who may happen to read this record, it may be necessary to provide some explanation for my powers and how the powers interact with the others in the group. With my truth vision, it is useful in revealing details. The limitation of this power is that truth is tied to the past. An event is not true until it actually occurs. This is one of the fallacies with knowledge and intelligence. They are reliant on a past event. With Goddess Themis' insight and power of foresight, these are tied to the present and the future. The fallacy.
I think what we should explain there is that what we're trying to suggest there is part of our own internal fan fiction. I kind of see that knowledge is tied to something that has happened in the past. If you think of life occurs sort of past, present, and future, right? So something in the future has not occurred yet. Everything in life happens in the moment, or present tense. And then so when a person studies things or makes a scientific observation and then turns that observation into theories and through testing they derive an interpretation of those processes, that in turn becomes knowledge, and they write that down. And as they write that down, other people can then take this knowledge They can analyze the knowledge. They can disagree with it, agree with it, form their own opinion about it. They can do more experimentations and so forth. And that's how in the modern day that these people live in, knowledge is derived through a process. So what she's describing there, our heroine, has the ability to see the truth. So she doesn't need to go through all of this processes. She knows what the truth is. She knows what has occurred in that moment in time. And she knows what the person did. She knows what the person was thinking, what they were trying to do, why they did, what was the intent. She knows that. She knows the truth at all times. She can't be lied to in the story. And part of that idea goes back to William Marston, as he always wanted a character so that one of her powers was she couldn't be lied to. And I kind of equate that to Superman's X-ray vision. The difference between Superman and Wonder Woman is his X-ray vision allows him to see in a range that most people can't. He can see through objects and stuff like that. She sort of has the same thing, but instead of X-ray vision, she sees the truth. She can't be lied to. So how we're using that is how for something to be true, we're saying in the literature that it must have occurred. If it hasn't occurred, then it's not necessarily true at that point. And that's the difference in our story with what they call the Themis, who has foresight, and Athenata, who has not necessarily hindsight. It would be hindsight. But she has her truth. She sees the truth at all times, which is different than reality. Reality isn't necessarily the truth, is what we're saying. Reality is defined by people's individual mind. People, with their limitation of their own individual interpretation of the world they see out there, can believe whatever they want, but it isn't necessarily the truth. Two people can witness the same event and come away with a different reality, right? And she, in turn, can get past all that. Is what we're saying. So we're back. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to let this play on, and be right back.
Sea of foresight is that the images of the future are just one step beyond imagination. Imagination and dreams are tools of anxiety. Anxiety is the part of the brain that enables people to make predictions using imagination. When people have adequate facts or experiences, the ability to make a prediction to solve a problem or to work on a task becomes highly likely to succeed. Without adequate facts or experiences, people must make an educated guess. The neurons in the brain will fill in details which may not be true, and this can lead to high anxiety. Now, to tie this into the crime scene, with Goddess Themis' powers and my powers, together, we can recreate the true events of the night that Cyrus Gold and Margaret Shaw were ambushed and executed, and with great confidence, the experience will be recreated with high fidelity. In time, we came to the spot in the location where the ambush had taken place. The vision revealed to all of us the execution of Margaret Shaw. Her moment was swift. Her body collapsed on the ground. The vision had proven to be difficult to watch for the group. Etta had a reaction. She went silent. The expression of horror that had shown in her face had been difficult to watch. I held her in my arms. Hippolyta had to look away as her friend was gunned down before her eyes. I can testify that homicide is never easy to witness in these visions. Sadly, it is one of the human behaviors that I have had to harden my soul over the years to carry on. Steve held Mother in his arms to comfort her. She cried for a moment and then recollected her composure. After the gunman completed the ambush, they gather bodies and placed them in pine-made boxes that they had brought along in horse-drawn wagons. The coffins containing the bodies were carried by wagon to a remote spot from the road. The distance had been a mile. They had dug 2 spots along a glade near a tall oak tree. It was a small spot free from the water from the swamp. The men lowered the bodies into the graves and buried the coffins. Strangely, they made a prayer for the 2 victims. Our group had located the burial site in the small glade. One of the graves had been disturbed when Solomon Grundy crawled up out of the ground. We had located the second grave and had worked to dig up the coffin. For the task of digging up the coffin, Themis, Hippolyta, and myself completed that task. I had used the sacred athame to cut a section of the ground out. The energy blade had cut into the ground with ease. In time, I had lifted the coffin out of the pit and had laid it on the ground. When the lid of the coffin had been removed, revealed to us had been an empty coffin. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Hippolyta had seemed shocked by the revelation that Margaret Shaw had crawled up out of her grave many years ago. This truth had been revealed to us as I had taken the time to further examine the burial site. But, unlike Solomon Grundy, whom had crawled out of his grave by brute force, Margaret did not disturb the ground to rise out of her grave. She had risen out of the grave as vapor. She simply floated away as a wisp. Without any further need to investigate the area, the group had made our way back to the car. Once loaded into the vehicle, we drove back to Wayne Manor. The ride back had proven to be a quiet one. Everyone had seemed to use the time to process what had just been witnessed. The ride back to the manor had taken another hour of time. Etta Candy's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Our group had returned to Wayne Manor after visiting the site of Margaret Shaw's tragic death. All of us had a depressed mood from the experience. Hippolyta had seemed the most affected by the event. This was the first time since I have known Hippolyta that I have seen her saddened by an event. I could sense from the telepathy bracelet that Hippolyta blamed herself for what happened that night with Margaret Shaw and Cyrus Gold. In a way, Margaret had been as much a lover to Hippolyta than a friend. I can only use my imagination to understand what Hippolyta is experiencing. Her friend, Margaret, had died, and because of the magical protection spell that Hippolyta had casted on Margaret and Cyrus, they were lost to us for 50 years. That had been until Saline Kyle had resurrected Solomon Grundy to attack the shipping trains of Wayne Consolidations and Consignments. Why Solomon had been resurrected, that reason remains an unknown variable at the time of my writing this report. As far as my feeling for Hippolyta, she has been a source of strength for me in the short time that I have known her. It is a weird thing that she is as much a friend for me as Diana or Steve. All that I could do is give her my heart and my soul as I hugged her warmly. "Will you be okay, Hippolyta?" I asked. She turned to me and smiled, as she had always done before. Her smile had shown strength and compassion. "Yes, I will be okay, Etta." I had always suspected the outcome of Margaret's death, but it is an entirely different experience to witness a homicide firsthand. As wonderful as Diana's truth vision can be, at some instances, it can be cruel. Hippolyta said. As we talked in the foyer of Wayne Manor, Manfred had walked up to us. "Madam Hippolyta, 2 young ladies are waiting for you in the living room. They arrived some time ago," Manfred said. Hippolyta used her telepathy to scan the nearby room. Then, she had made her way over to the living room. The rest of us followed her to the room. In the living room, there were 2 tall brunette women. I had immediately recognized them as Diana's sisters Drusilla and Donna. Hippolyta had walked up to both of the women and gave them each a kiss on the cheeks. "Drusilla, it is so wonderful to see you," Hippolyta said. "Donna, it is so wonderful to see you." Hippolyta said. "Yes, mother. We received your message and headed over to meet with you as soon as possible." Donna said. "Good. I have some projects that I need your help with." Hippolyta said. "Of course, mother, whatever that you need." Drusilla said. Diana had walked over to her 2 sisters and gave them both kisses on the cheeks. "Welcome to Gotham County, Drusilla and Donna," Diana said. The 2 women were dressed casually in jeans and with light-colored earth-toned blouses. Drusilla had worn a light brown blouse, and Donna had worn a light green blouse. They both had capped off their ensembles with brown boots. Elizabeth had entered the living room accompanied by Patrick and Silas. The 2 men had seemed pleased to meet Diana's sisters. "Elizabeth, I would like you to meet my daughters, Donna and Drusilla," Hippolyta said. Elizabeth had given the 2 sisters a kiss on the cheeks. Then she introduced her sons. "Thank you, it is so wonderful to meet you too. Hippolyta has spoken of you too. I would like you to meet my sons, Silas and Patrick, Elizabeth said. Donna was the first to meet Silas and Patrick. She gave each of the men a kiss on the cheeks. Drusilla followed her sister's lead and greeted the two men in the same manner. I must ask, Diana, are all your sisters so beautiful? Silas asked. Yes, it is a curse, Diana said jokingly. Of course, you two already know Steve and Etta, Hippolyta said. Of course, Mother, Donna said. Drusilla had sensed something was wrong with her mother. What is it, Mother? You seem down, Drusilla said. Oh, I learned of a shocking truth earlier today and have not had adequate time to process the encounter, Hippolyta said. Is there anything I can do for you, Mother? Drusilla asked. Thank you, Drusilla. I am afraid that only time can help me through this issue. I would like to go for a swim if it is all right with everyone, Hippolyta said. Of course, Hippolyta. I will have Manfred move the dinner buffet closer to the pool from the dining room so that we all can dine in the pool room tonight, Elizabeth said. Thank you, Elizabeth. Diana, help Donna and Drusilla settle into their rooms, Hippolyta said. Of course, Mother, Diana said. The group had all separated to get ready for the dining in the pool room. Myself, I used the time to check in on Walter and Paris. I had used my telepathy bracelet to call to the two cats. As I had walked closer to my room, the two cats had greeted me at the door. Good evening, Walter, and good evening, Paris, I said. The two cats had rubbed against my lower leg.
Here are 2 stars of the movie show, the cats, remember? Now, any other person, now Walter has been in every book, because he's Etta's cat, been in every story. We met Paris, the Munchkin cat, with Hippolyta's cat, and so, remember, they came with them in the previous book, and they're staying at Wayne's Manor, and part of this process, they're starting to purchase this other house, which will eventually become the Brownstone Estate, or the Justice Society of America, which is headquartered, which is in Baltimore County, Maryland, which in our lore, Baltimore County is Gotham County, and Baltimore City is Gotham City in our story. The national city is Washington, D.C., which is right near each other, and they're only a couple minutes away. I've lived there, so in that area, so it's not that far. Anyone familiar with the area knows that there's within driving distance, and so but they're 2 different cities, very different cities in that. If you're not familiar with the Washington D.C. area, it's, I don't want to say it's a unique place in its own right, but it's kind of, in my experience with Washington D.C., and first time I went to Washington D.C. was in the 1980s. I've been there through most of the 90s and early 2000, all the way up till 2004. I've known about Washington D.C. First time I went to Washington D.C. was in 1985, 86, I believe, and it's been a long time. So there's sort of a daytime part of Washington D.C. where there's a lot of people working there, but then there's a whole nighttime part of Washington D.C. and depending on what side of D.C. you live on, live near like where M Street, where all the clubs and embassies are at, that's sort of one culture. And then there's a south side of DC and a north side of DC that are completely different cultures. Very violent side of DC. Which I think in the 40s, I think it was there, but it wasn't as extensive as it is now. A lot of ghettos in DC, but the ghetto part of DC is really on the Maryland side, and not the Virginia side. Virginia side is really clean, very quiet. People have a lot of money on the Virginia side. The Crystal City side, where the Pentagon's at, pretty upscale area. But you cross the river, And Columbia is actually a town in Maryland where DC is part of. That's where they get the District of Columbia from, which is right outside of Columbia. Columbia is a huge area, and a pretty nice area. I've been to it. It's pretty nice. Rockville's pretty nice. Bethesda's over there, and the main thing is that as far as the two cats are concerned, we continue their story on, and we're setting up the story for the Justice Society, which in this story, these two books, you're going to see the beginning of that story in terms of people. And this is the first story in which we have metahumans in the story, where the immortals meet the metahumans in the story. And then the metahumans are the ones who essentially help the immortals in the story. Now, this story has to be balanced in a way where the immortals maintain control over what they're doing, but at the same time we allow the metahumans to sort of shine in the story. But we have to do it in a way that brings sort of dignity to the immortals in the story. And that's a very thin line thin line to walk. Story. Here we go.
Legs as they scratched at the door. Yes, how are you two tonight? Let me get changed and then I will get your dinners ready, I said. The two cats had proceeded to walk up onto my bed and lay down. Not surprisingly, the two cats had maintained a well-mannered behavior. I had used the time to shower and dress into my two-piece swim clothes. I used the time after my shower to make a journal entry while I had waited for my hair to dry.
Field report to HQ by Helmet Striker, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, after traveling to a remote...
Now, Helmet Striker's part here is essentially... It's really a pointer scene. He's recapping what happened in the last book for the people that didn't read the book. One thing when you're writing a serial novel that has books prior to it and books that are going to come after it, when you're sitting down writing it and plotting it out, usually the first chapter has to sort of recap the book for the people that didn't read the previous book. Like the last chapter has to lead pretty much to the next book, but at the same time, you can't assume that people are going to read the next book. So you have to sort of, for the people that aren't going to go on and read it, it sort of ends for them. But for the people that go on, you leave enough material that when they continue on to the next story, it all makes sense. So, like the last book, where Etta, her last journal, she pretty much says, and as the week went on, everybody lived happily ever after, pretty much. That's not what she actually said, but that's pretty much what she meant. And that's for the people that didn't read the next book. But for the people that read the book, they know that there's like 12 there's 12 days that go on. There's a whole lot of story that goes on, and this is the story. And then there's a whole period of time after Christmas and before the New Year that book 4 goes over. So this is what we're using Helmet Striker for in this part of the story. He's basically, here's what happened in the last book. But since we didn't really get to meet him in the last book, for those that read the book and may be reading this chapter, we're sort of using this moment to really give him a, who is this guy? What's he about? Who is he in the lore? You can't assume people know who Helmet Striker is in the lore. And he's it's an old Wonder Woman character, but not a lot of people know him as Helmet Striker. He's also known as the Red, what is it? Red, Iron. Is he the Red something? Anyway. But he's longtime foe for Wonder Woman, and that's why we have him. We have portraying him for us in the story is from Young and the Restless. I forget his name. I know who he is, but at the top of my head I forget it. He'll come to me in a minute. The veteran actor there.
Remote safe house in West Virginia. Our unit had made it to the new headquarters, HQ. We had to travel slowly to avoid any unnecessary stops by the local and the state police. I had wasted no time to record this journal entry while the events were fresh in my memory. The following accounts are true as I had remembered them. The incident at the Iceberg Lounge had not gone well. General, the American authorities did a remarkable job of containing information about last night's incident. First, I must preface my next statements by stating that we must rethink our strategy of using agents from the occult sciences in our future endeavors. As incredible as the abilities of these occult agents and the meta-human agents, employed by the Gestapo, are, the outcome of their labors and the margin of success is too random to be a reliable prediction for our needs. So that you have all the facts to render an informed decision, I will provide a brief overview of the last few days. In November, we had begun a strategy of attacking the shipping lines from Gotham County, Maryland to a place in Tennessee which is officially titled as the Clinton Engineering Works. What is being developed there, we do not know at this time. Our plan had been to use the Homo Zombie that local folks named Solomon Grundy to attack the trains delivering supplies to Tennessee. Our plan had been to use the Homo Zombie to draw out the American agent Wonder Woman. If possible, we might capture the agent. Our local intelligence sources had relayed to us that the female agent was invulnerable to death. Our occult specialists provided reasonable evidence that demonstrated the female agent was an immortal being. As I am not prone to believe such nonsense as in immortal beings, I would be a fool not to understand that the female agent possesses remarkable abilities that have not been witnessed in many of the meta-humans that our sciences have been able to witness and not provide adequate explanation for these phenomenon. Nonetheless, the American agent and her cohorts defeated our efforts at the Iceberg Lounge last night. I will expand on this in detail at this time. As you know, General, High Command issued orders to our field offices last month to capture the American field agent Wonder Woman. Our field office developed a separate plan with the help of local citizens that are sympathetic to our Nazi cause. Our local field office had received information that a local crime boss would be able to assist in our efforts. His name is Vincent Falcone, and he resides in Gotham County, Maryland. With the aid of the American crime boss, we set up a field office in the local city, Gotham City. He had recommended that the Wayne Consolidation and Consignments Company was transporting a shipment of supplies to the place in Tennessee. It was recommended that by attacking the trains heading to the target destination, that the War Department would be forced to send field agents to investigate the matter. As predicted by our analyst, the office of Colonel Darnell sent his top field agent Major Steve Trevor to investigate. Major Trevor's party had requested a table at the Iceberg Lounge via a local celebrity named Alan Scott. Mr. Scott is the owner of the Gotham Radio Broadcast Company that is a large media market in the Gotham County area. Our occult science agent, Saline Kyle, forecasted that Major Trevor would investigate the Iceberg Lounge by tracing magical currents in the atmosphere. Note, General, that the term magical is the method local occultists use to distinguish from what they term true magic to the techniques performed on stage for entertainment, which is termed magic. To be fair, General, Miss Kyle is in a relationship with Mr. Falcone. Her feelings for our cause may be compromised by her relationship to Mr. Falcone. Mr. Falcone, an Italian-born American, recommended her services for our plot. At first, I had been highly skeptical of her abilities, but I decided to entertain her claims. At first, her abilities proved valid to our cause as the Homo Zombie Solomon Grundy attacked the American railway lines with remarkable precision. As you may know, General, our intelligence operations were compromised by Wonder Woman in late November when she had been instrumental with the interception of Baroness Paula von Gunther's field office in Washington, D.C., in West Virginia, and in London. However, Mistress Kyle's labors did produce successful results. Major Trevor's group showed up at the Iceberg Lounge on Tuesday, December 14, 1943, which had been our local field office in Gotham City at the time. No doubt, His field analyst traced the Homo zombies' path to the facilities. Mistress Kyle had placed devices which she called magical orbs around the facilities that blocked the Americans from spying on our activities there. Our field agents guarding the facility intercepted Major Trevor's group as they attempted to investigate the Iceberg Lounge. I had been able to interrogate the Major directly about the Clinton Engineering Works in Tennessee, but he did not divulge any information that our field office had not already learned. Since the Major had been reluctant to provide me with information, I had decided to kill one of the field agents of Major Trevor. As you know, Americans are weak and timid when it comes to torture or death of a fellow cohort. We Germans are not so weak. Next, I ordered Salene Kyle to instruct the Homo zombie Solomon Grundy to attack one of the young ladies escorting Major Trevor and Alan Scott. Mistress Kyle had carried out my orders and instructed Solomon Grundy to attack one of the young maidens. At first, the large Homo zombie had proceeded to attack one of the young women. The creature appeared to recognize the maiden and called out to her briefly. I had heard him say, "Hippolyta," to the young maiden. The creature refused to obey the command from Salene Kyle, so I ordered Mistress Kyle to attack the other young maiden. The creature had obeyed the order from Mistress Kyle. The Homo zombie had proceeded to attack the young agent when Alan Scott revealed himself to be the meta-human, the Green Lantern. The Green Lantern is a local title given to a local vigilante/hero in popular American culture. It is not a surprise to me that Major Trevor is a friend of his. The Green Lantern had leaped in front of the Homo zombie. At first, his efforts proved successful against the powerful Solomon Grundy, but the Homo zombie had overcome the foolish hero. The results of Mr. Scott's labors had been to be severely injured. The Homo zombie had smashed the skeletal structure of Alan Scott. It had been at this time that the other two female agents had revealed themselves to be Wonder Women. Truthfully, both women appeared to be the same age, which I would estimate to be around 25 years of age, while the third female agent appeared to be younger than the other two women, which I would estimate to be around 23 years of age. In my position at the incident, I had been able to overhear one of the Wonder Women refer to the other Wonder Woman as Mother. This is when the American group of agents split up into two groups. One of the Wonder Women had proceeded to lift the large creature and hurl him through the ceiling of the basement of the Iceberg Lounge. Within a matter of minutes, the Wonder Woman had been able to move the encounter to the outside of the building. The battle had continued out on the street in front of the club. For some time, the creature had proven to be unsuccessful at defeating the Wonder Woman. However, like all women, she proved to be inferior to the creature's superior male cunningness. The Homo zombie had been able to fool the Wonder Woman into a false sense of superiorness. In her hubris, the foolish woman had leaped to attack the creature in the back of the neck. Solomon Grundy had tricked the maiden and had rendered her helpless with a power attack. I theorized that the creature had used a powerful male pheromone to attack the female agent. She had fallen to the ground and had flopped around in an uncontrollable frenzy. The maiden cried out wildly as her body had succumbed to a powerful sexual orgasm. This had seemed to me to had weakened the Wonder Woman and had made her subjugated to the male creature. The wild creature had seemed to become more animated as the female agent had been made helpless in front of him. He had attacked her 2 more times with the male pheromone musk that he had sprayed the maiden with. Each time the maiden had been sprayed by the musk, she had convulsed and had orgasmed wildly on the ground. The creature had probed the female agent several times to ensure that she had not been baiting him. Once he had been satisfied, the creature had proceeded to rape the maiden. Without any resistance from the maiden, the creature removed the maiden's corset and tights. Also, the creature appeared to be able to control the young maiden's golden lasso. He used the lasso to restrain her and make her docile. The creature had appeared to rape the maiden at will until she had orgasmed in a blinding white light that sent shockwaves out for kilometers. Then, she had been made completely helpless and submissive to the creature. The wild creature had continued to rape her body when a strange phenomenon had occurred. The creature had changed into a young man. He had appeared to be around 32 years of age to me. He had seemed to show shock in his expression when he realized what he had been doing to the young maiden. The two combatants had appeared to collapse from exhaustion. Major Trevor and his confederates had retrieved their bodies and had taken them to an unknown place. My group, we had retreated to our safe house in West Virginia with the aid of Vincent Falcone. Mr. Falcone's people were detained by the federal and local authorities for questioning after the incident at the Iceberg Lounge. Mr. Falcone's associate Theodore Cobblepot had stayed behind to deal with the cleanup efforts at the lounge. As you can read from my report, General, The operation had proved to be a failure, and we have exposed our intelligence operations to unnecessary peril. This failure clearly falls on the shoulders of the occult science expert Saline Kyle. It was her failure that led to our retreat. It was her belief in that ridiculous occult science that gave the American intelligence a victory over our efforts. Still, the incident has provided us with some important information. The Wonder Woman can be defeated with the right stimuli or weapons. The Homo Zombie demonstrated that the female agent is not invincible. We must prepare ourselves to develop weapons specifically designed to deal with the female's biological and psychological weaknesses. I will put my people to work on these details at once. I shall hold my people here at the safe house until I receive my orders from you, General.
Saline Kyle's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I am not sure where it is that I should begin this journal entry today. As the events from last night went until 3 o'clock in the morning, I had chosen to sleep well into the afternoon. As our operations ended in failure last night, Vincent and I were able to escape the Iceberg Lounge before the authorities arrived to begin their investigation. We had to leave Theodore behind to run block for our escape. I believe that he will be okay. To avoid the police, I had to open a portal to a pocket dimension. This provided Vincent and I with a conduit to our safe house in West Virginia. As for Colonel Stryker's group, Vincent had his aides escort the Nazi spies to a safe house location. Their group had arrived at our safe house a little after 12 o'clock noon. Although the colonel had tried to conceal his anger, I could feel it running deep in his soul. I am sure that he will place last night's failure onto me. Men like the colonel are cowards at heart. Any failure in their lives will be blamed on the closest female that is in proximity to them. Vincent used to be that way. The years have changed him. It was wonderful seeing Hippolyta again last night. I knew that raising Solomon Grundy from the dead would bring her out. Seeing her last night brought back the feelings and the memories deep inside my mind that I had thought were long ago extinguished. Is that why you raised Cyrus Gold, Saline? A strong voice asked from behind me. I had turned to look behind me and there stood the goddess Kirki. She had appeared to me in through a pocket dimension that she had created using magic. I stood and bowed before the goddess. My goddess, Kirki, how may I honor you? I had asked. I was concerned for you, Saline. I could feel the conflict within you over the last few weeks, and, after the incident last night with Diana at the Iceberg Lounge, I wanted to see you for myself. Kirki said. Kirki reached out to me with a kind arm. It had seemed more like the arm that a mother would yield to a daughter, than the arm of a commander or ruler. Her concern towards me had been genuine. Your concern for me is genuine, my goddess. I would have thought that you would have been angry with me, I said. In this instance, I think the title of grandmother may be best. Although, I am many generations past that in your case. You are the daughter of my daughter, Arachne, and I will always be concerned for you. You are my family, and nothing is more important to me than my family. Kirki said. Thank you, Grandmother Kirki. It means a lot to me to know that someone in this realm cares for me. I had thought that avenue had been closed to me long ago when I had Cyrus Gold and Margaret Shaw killed off to save Vincent Falcone from certain doom. I said. Kirki leaned closer to me and held my hands and looked into my heart with her mesmerizing eyes. I am proud of you for making an attempt at raising a homo zombie like Solomon Grundy from the dead. But, you are too young to make such an attempt. But, your heart was in the right place, Saline. Diana had been successful at restoring Cyrus Gold to his former youth, and, I have it on good authority that Goddess Athena instructed Diana to redeem Cyrus Gold and you. Right now, the Princess of Themyscira searches for you, she said. Until last night, I had never met the princess. She is very beautiful, just like her mother. Sometimes, I wish that I had grown up on the immortal plane. I said. Well, if I had my way, then you would have been, but your mother insisted on raising you in the mortal plane. I have never understood why your mother insists on hanging out with these mortal men like Vincent Falcone and Ra's al Ghul. She said. Well, from what mother tells me, you introduced her to Ra's al Ghul. I said. Kirki smiled at me. Well, the world was a different place hundreds of years ago. And besides, Goddess Ares asked me to help them, she said. And of course, grandmother, you can never say no to Goddess Ares. I said jokingly. What can I say? He knows how to press my buttons, Saline, she said. Kirki paused for a moment to recollect her thoughts. So, what are you going to do with this Colonel Stryker? Kirki asked. I have a feeling that he is going to cross me in the coming days. My instincts tell me to let him play his game. I said. Do you want my help, Saleen? Kirky asked. No, I think it will be best to let the colonel think that he has won the battle, then crush his spirit. I said, that is the family way. She said, thank you, grandmother. If I should need your help, then I will not hesitate to ask. I said, and with that, our exchange of words had come to an end. My grandmother had stepped through her portal and had returned back to her home inn. I had returned to finishing my journal.
Alan Scott's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. As I lay in this medical bed recovering from the injuries that I had sustained from last night's battle with Solomon Grundy at the Iceberg Club, I am thankful that I am alive. There are no words that I can write in this journal that can fully express my appreciation for the group comprising of my friends Steve Trevor and Diana Prince. I am finding it difficult to construct the words for this journal entry, but I must find the energy to continue on. Hippolyta has been in and out checking on my progress. She had sent for a team of doctors and nurses from Themyscira to assist in my recovery. Diana has given me the completed report from last night's incident at the Iceberg Club. I have read through the parts of the report that I had not witnessed by my own eyes. How the princess had suffered in the battle last night, it was incredible. How Cyrus Gold had been saved in the end, it was remarkable. So now, I lay in this bed reviewing the reports from the last couple of days. The epistolary form that the reports from Diana's formal journal make for an interesting read. I guess that I should use this time to cover my experience from last night until now. After our battle with Solomon Grundy at the Iceberg Club last night, I had been brought back to the Hippolyta's car and driven back to Wayne Manor. Hippolyta had her and Diana's ships moved to the manor. Throughout the whole event, I had been conscious and aware. I am not sure what medication that I had been given, but it proved to be effective. I had been placed in a tank of biomedical fluid. My body had been regenerated by the bath. The part of the operation or medical procedure that I had found most fascinating had been the staff of people were androids. The droids were left with me to oversee my recovery while the others went on a trip away from the manor. Of course, like an idiot, I referred to one of the droids as android. The droid soon corrected me. What is the difference between an android and a gynoid? I asked. A gynoid is a droid designed to be a female droid and an android is a droid designed to be a male droid. She said, oh, I'm sorry, I did not mean to offend you. I said, my name is Holly, you can call me Holly. She said, what had been remarkable about the droids is that they appeared to be so real. Had I not been told that the droids were not human, I would never had realized that fact. Many of the droids were quite attractive. I am finding it difficult to hold my concentration. I will set the journal down for a while and come back to it when my energy level is higher. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My energy levels have recovered thanks to Dr. Holly.
Now it should be important to note that Alan Scott is a gay guy and that he's not attracted to the Holly there, even though he's saying that she's attracted. What he's having difficulty concentrating on is that he suffered a traumatic event the night before. His bones were shattered, and then his bones were reconstituted back. First, it was Athenata who restores him, but it's through the medical bath that his body regenerated slowly over time. But he's still feeling the effects of the trauma, which is why he's having difficulty concentrating, because he was in a lot of pain, and that pain is subsiding slowly. But I think it needed to be clarified there that in case people didn't know and didn't read the previous book, that he's a homosexual man. He's not attracted to the gynoid in this case. Gynoid is our own invention. If you think of the term android, andros is the Greek word for men. So it's a droid that looks like a man. Whereas we decided to call the female droids gynoids because gyna is the Greek word for female. So we thought it would be appropriate and balanced that you would refer to the droid that are female oriented as gynoid, and we started that. Now I couldn't think of a name, and originally I wanted Marilyn Monroe to be a different character. In the original story that I wrote, she was going to be the person Steve Trevor met in book 1. And she would be the what's her name, the sister, what's her name, not Lila Brown, but the other sister Brown. Anyway, but when I set these up for the video book part, I had did this book first. So not having done that book yet, I put her as Holly because I needed someone to just look awesome, and so I chose her. But therein created a problem for the first book when we went to do the video book part of it. So I decided to keep Marilyn Monroe as the gynoid in this because she's going to have a bigger role later on as the novels, at least in the 1940 era. She's going to have a bigger role. And when we get into the 1950s, when we get to the seers being added, one of the things that happens when in the early days of the Justice Society is Athenata is the healer for the group, basically. And so she's healing everybody. And then when she goes away, he takes over the healing part because he can heal people through his ring. But what they discover in practice is that it takes a tremendous amount of energy to heal people. Especially if you want them healed quickly. It takes a tremendous amount of energy. And he ends up realizing that his ring is being drained quickly. And so the Amazons decide to incorporate seers into the supergroups at that point. And when you get to the 2016 story, where we run into Athenata again, Steve Trevor crashes on the island, or Themyscira, and he's assigned a seer, a medical person. Seers they're trained as medical doctors, and they're trained in advanced medical techniques, and they don't heal through magic, although a lot of them have foresight. They're basically the modern version of the Oracle of Adelphi, but they're seers. They see the future. And so but they can't heal like Athenata can. They don't have like divine healing. they're just advanced, basically advanced doctors, the advanced technology, and that's how they heal people in the story. And she's the beginning of that because they're droids in the story. They're medical droids, basically, in the story. Kind of like in Star Wars, where they had the medical droids were healing everybody. In this case, it's the female droids that are healing everybody. And they become seers in the story. And they can see, like Etta Candy, they gave her the bracelet. She has the ability of foresight as a droid, and it's a technology that the immortals have in the story, and humans don't know how to do that in the story. So let's go on.
I had adjusted my prescription of medications and my body has recovered enough for me to resume my journal. What I wanted to write earlier had been that the medical facilities on board Hippolyta's and Diana's ships were incredible. The amount of damage my body sustained from Solomon Grundy had been significant. All my bones had been shattered, and my body had gone into instant shock from the trauma. But after Diana regenerated my body in the field and after Hippolyta had treated my injuries in the medical tank this morning, I feel quite normal as can be expected. Hippolyta and Diana had gone out with the others to look over the brownstone estate of John Soder. He owned the famous Soder Cola Company, and he had been Elizabeth's father. I had forgotten about how much tragedy Elizabeth had endured prior to the start of the war. The last few days, I have had the privilege of sharing in Elizabeth's joy. I apologize if my report is difficult to follow. My mind is filled with many topics that I want to report about, but I am finding it difficult to stay on point without it coming across as babble. My concerns are with Cyrus Gold, Currently, he is in the next medical suite from mine. The medical staff is conducting a full psychological examination for Mr. Gold. How difficult must it be for him to be 32 years of age and missing the last 50 years of his life? I cannot even begin to imagine what he is going through. I have sent a letter to 2 friends of mine, John Jones and Jay Garrick. They have not heard from me in several days and may be concerned for my health. I will have one of the doctors send out the letter for me. Cyrus Gold's Journal, Wednesday, December 15, 1943, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What a day that today has been. My memories are disjointed and fractured. The doctors tell me that.
Alright, we're gonna pause it there. We'll pick it up here tomorrow. I'm kind of leading to we're gonna start working on this story next. Because it's really on my mind, but I don't want to go any further than that. Let's go ahead and bring up Nightbot. Go ahead and do the intermission. Bring this over. And there'll be a slight delay. We're going to end this clip and restart it. That way we have a fresh new clip for the next part. And we'll be right back in 30 seconds.